Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and Star Wars is under attack yet again. This time, not from divisive, right-wing trolls such as myself, as we're so oft called, but no, from the people that they want to pander to and include the most, the diversity and inclusion crowd. But why would the diversity and inclusion crowd attack Star Wars? They've been such good little lapdogs, bending to every whim. Well, for whatever reason, not diversitying the right way. Let's take a look at this article. From We Got This Covered, Star Wars shows exactly how to not make interesting trans characters. And then we've got these galaxy far, far away Quan Chi wannabes here for light and life and will never be separated again. And yeah, that's great. Yeah, you ripping off of Mortal Kombat. Really appreciate you, Lucasfilm. Originality is dead. The Disney age of Star Wars has seen the introduction of some pretty incredible characters. The franchise has widely opened the door to diversity, inviting kids of all ages, races, and genders to see themselves represented in a galaxy far, far away. Because remember, children, you were not allowed, it was against the rules, to identify with Luke Skywalker and his goodness and his growth and his hero's journey unless you were a straight white male. Women? Ha! Sorry, go play with your Barbies. You're not allowed to relate to Luke. Little black boys? Look, man, you got Static Shock and Black Panther. You really want Luke too? No, it's against the rules. Star Wars segregation. No, clearly kids could identify with anybody, but we want to go ahead and laud Disney for all the greatness they did for diversity and inviting kids of all ages and genders to see themselves in a galaxy far, far away, when really we should be teaching the lesson that you should be able to identify with any of these positive qualities of a character, regardless of the surface level skin deep stuff. But by all means, go ahead, open up the DVD player and pop in another disc of Kung Fu Panda. But for every introduction that has captured the hearts of the viewers, there are others that have definitely missed the mark. Tarek and Sarat, co-to-be Jedi created for the comic series Star Wars The High Republic, are among those inclusions that don't hit quite right. And I imagine that is the Quan Chi looking mofos here. It's ultimately a shame as the High Republic series is solid overall. Just set after the formation of the Republic, it follows the Jedi at the height of their power and is littered with skilled and interesting Jedi making their way through the galaxy helping the fledgling Republic. Yes, all this at the cost of all this great lore. It adds some creative beasties the Knights take on and even introduces the concept of battle huts. Seriously, it's worth the read just to see the tubby slug people kick. You can't say tubby. That's against the rules for you people that love diversity and inclusion. Main character Keeve Trennis has so many powerful Jedi to compare herself to. Really? And now you want your powerful female character comparing herself to others? You have clearly lost the plot on diversity and inclusion. We got this covered. Who are Tarek and Sarat? Well, it's clearly obvious. This is the Air Jordan logos that gain sentience. These twins are part of a hairless, non-binary humanoid race with ash-pale skin and eyes so dark they recess. They look like an Attack on Titan character with a healthy dose of PTSD. I like the Air Jordan comparison better, but I can see it. They're both inquisitive and analytical, not bad traits, but executed much the same way Mr. Spock behaves in Star Trek. It's a joke how fascinating and intriguing everything is for the two, one emphasized by their off-putting appearance, the artist's tendency to use faces to overexpress emotion. I mean, that's comics in general, though. I'm not going to criticize too much for that and not having read it. The other defining trait is the tragically overused twin telepathy trope with a healthy dose of the single-minded twins cliche layered on top. The two share a hive mind and, as described by other characters, essentially act as one being. Their bond is so intense that they can feel another's pain and emotions. When one is possessed by an evil entity, the other goes down with them. The fusion could be a fascinating cornerstone for the characters, except they never grow past it. The only thing the writers can come up with for them, and leaves the reader wishing the twins were something more. Their shared brilliant mind is essentially only used to share information from one group to another, like the galaxy doesn't have a long-distance communication already. Beyond rudimentary technology to fill their position, the other Jedi also use various versions of the only thing that makes the twins interesting. That's the problem with using a trope like twin telepathy in the universe of super people. The twins' hive mind isn't something outside the norm for Jedi. Luke could sense the danger of his friend's face in Cloud City, Leia felt Luke reaching out to her, and Anakin Skywalker dreamed of his mother's pain for weeks. And you know what? I will give this article credit for at least respecting the original trilogy enough to use it as a source. You know what? Good on you, we got this covered. The one defined aspect of the twins is something that most other Jedi can do. This is barely enough substance to the two to make one character, and yet the writers split them into two Dr. Manhattan-looking weirdos that rarely shine as brightly as the other Jedi in the series. Okay, Dr. Manhattan did that after the Attack on Titan quip earlier. It's a good juxtaposition of jokes. Good job, I appreciate you. Characters are allowed to be imperfect, especially in comics where there isn't room for superfluous dialogue, and most wouldn't have batted an eye at the twins' lackluster inclusion if it wasn't for the way they were introduced. On the Transgender Day of Visibility, the duo were posted to an Instagram with a message, "We support trans lives, and we are passionate and committed to broadening our representation in a galaxy far, far away." The sentiment is laudable. Is it though? I think he misspelled laughable. as the inclusion of a character to represent this group of people. The problem is companies like Disney heralding this moment to the world's largest gong with the smallest mallet. Well, I'm sorry, but you get what you asked for. You wanted Disney to go out there and make all these changes and ask for all this representation and to change their little flag bios when certain months appear. This is what you get. You're going to get the bare minimum stuff that looks good for the press, and then when you question it, you're going to look like one of us right-wing trolls that you complain so much about. What does trans or non-binary mean? Well, I'm pretty sure it means if you're on Twitter and you scroll through and see even the hint of positivity towards J.K. Rowling, you scream through your phone and act like it's the Holocaust 2 Electric Boogaloo. It's important to have definitions of what either term means on hand as we go forward, and to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of gender identities, all of which are absolutely made up, but yes, I guess the spectrum does technically exist. There are trans people who identify as non-binary, but that group is the tiny center of a massive Venn diagram. The two communities on either side have many more folks that could be represented. It's not that this particular subset of trans people doesn't exist. There are certainly those who fall into that category and deserve to be represented, but the insistence of these two identities is what makes the whole ordeal so strange. Non-binary is when a person doesn't identify with male or female as their primary gender. They can identify as male and female at the same time, or something in between the two, or as something completely outside the two identities. It's like an umbrella term for people who don't fit the typical characteristics of gender, the acceptance of many gender identities, or none at all. Yeah, exactly, it's the golden corral of sexualities. To be transgender is to have gender different from the one you were assigned at birth. This means essentially that whatever outward-facing biology one has doesn't reflect the inner self. Trans people typically acknowledge gender since they feel conflicted about the differences between what gender they are and what gender they are assigned at birth. Why does it matter? Well, if you were to ask me, in 99% of cases, it absolutely doesn't. This is people starved for affection and attention because they didn't get enough hugged from the right significant other as a child, or haven't gone through any sort of real-life struggle to know what the real world is all about, and this is the closest they can come up with to create some sort of strife and turmoil in their lives so they can fill that void and need for conflict. Or the hug thing. Either way, 99% of the times, it doesn't matter, but let's see what they got to say. To have an alien race identify as non-binary isn't a stretch. Gender is a construct that doesn't exist in the wild. Gender absolutely exists in the wild. Gender and sex are the same thing, but let's continue. Chimeras, hermaphroditic animals, and non-binary animals have all been observed in nature, all of which are extremely rare, with the exception of maybe non-binary if you want to talk about like single-celled organisms, but hermaphroditic animals and chimeras, yeah, they're not exactly the reason that evolution has continued over the last hundreds of millions of years, but whatever. So planets where gender doesn't exist make plenty of sense. What doesn't is the inclusion of trans for a character that potentially comes from a genderless society. To change from one gender to another, there has to be the acceptance of gender. The Kotzebue twins have this label slapped on them without ever taking the time to explore the concept of why they would choose it. It's incredibly similar to the scientific terms thrown around in films or comics. It brings painful flashbacks to every 90s hacker movie, and the slang Hollywood thought made it sound like an authority on the subject. It's like a writer heard the term, thought it sounded cool, and decided to use it. Or worse, an executive saw the nondescript design of the characters and decided to throw a label on it without reason why. So, in this entire article, they've been preaching about how non-binary and trans are different. They might have some small crossover, but they are very different, and we should acknowledge that, and the writers didn't do a good enough job in acknowledging that. Well, I just did a quick Twitter search for trans non-binary, and like the first 4 profiles I got, oh, trans non-binary, they, them. I believe all music is art. Fan account, 27-year-old trans non-binary. Still figuring it out. Ray's still here. Still queers, trans, and non-binary right now. Yeah, right now, because they can just change it. They can turn it off and on at will. Avi Roque, they, them, Latine, trans, non-binary, queer. A lot of these individuals seem to be trans and non-binary for something that only rarely coexists in this large Venn diagram. So here we are, Disney doing what they want them to do. Disney doing all this diversity pushing, and it's still not good enough. What more could they possibly do? It's Star Wars. This is a comic about space wizards that apparently for some reason look like they belong more in Mortal Kombat. And these two-dimensional, otherworldly sci-fi mages aren't representative enough for you? I'm shocked. I'm flabbergasted. Let's continue. Without exploring the topic, it becomes placating, pointless diversity push. You mean what people like myself and others have been saying for literal years? You almost have this. We got this covered. You're almost in the right vicinity of the ballpark. It's the worst form of wokeness, which they had to put in quotes for obvious reasons, because it feeds the right-wing trolls who don't want diversity pushes in the first place. Wrong again, Susie Q. We've been saying we don't like these diversity pushes because they are corporate pointless trash, because they're wokeness, because they are placating. We don't want these for all the same reasons you are calling out here. The 99% of right-wing trolls didn't have an issue with Finn. In fact, many of us believe that he was the only good part, or at least the best part, of the Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy. And you know what? They screwed him over. But the character was fine. Wish they had done more with him. There was, yeah, you're going to have those few minorities on either side that throw a fit about every little thing. But the vast majority of us found Finn, and by extension John Boyega, to be the only refreshing part of the sequel trilogy. We don't want these lame corporate, oh, we must include this for this reason. I don't remember seeing any right-wing troll throwing a fit about how gay Arcane was, even though there was a lot of gay shit in Arcane, because that show was just so well written, the characters were well done, it did everything right, and it didn't feel like it had an agenda behind it. So I wouldn't say this is about feeding the right-wing trolls who don't want diversity pushes. When you do it right, it should feel natural to the story, and many stories used to do that right. Check out my video on race swapping if you want an example of this. Waving a banner of inclusion without conversations around why it matters, or the very real struggles that accompany the trans experience, makes them less impactful. We love Luke because of his struggle with the dark side. Finn because of his struggle to overcome fears. You even mentioned Finn. Exactly. Yeah, we love Finn. I agree. And I'm one of those right-wing trolls, even though I've said repeatedly on my channel I'm not right-wing. I'm very down the middle, but whatever. And Ahsoka for her struggle to do what she knows is right, even when it means she loses everything. And you know what? Ahsoka is top 5 favorite Star Wars characters of all time for me. Or am I supposed to hate her because I can't identify with her because she's a woman and I'm a dude? We love heroes because of the things they go through. When the struggle is removed or glossed over, it gives the reader nothing to root for in the character. You're almost getting this, because you're right there. You are correct, which is what so many of us have talked about with these diversity and inclusion pushes. These characters aren't made to struggle. You can't have the black characters go through anything bad. You can't have the female characters fail, because, well, that's going to give the wrong impression. We need these minority characters, these diversity characters, these female characters to actually have negative qualities about them too, so that we can root for them. Hence, Arcane being awesome. No one throwing a fit about how gay it is because the characters are legit characters, not carbon cutout copies of just diversity and inclusion tags that need to be thrown into TV to get the modern day Oscar nods or whatever. The twins are skilled with their lightsabers and offer relatively consistent background assists, but they're oddities in their own world. As Jedi, their dedication to their monastic order and many rules or relationships already put on a block between them and average people. Couple that with their Spock-like depiction, atrocious character designs. Really? I don't know about atrocious. Generic, maybe, but maybe not atrocious. And representation without reasoning, and you have a recipe for a character that could alienate even the most impassioned Star Wars fan. At the end of the day, this does count as progress. No, it doesn't. You gotta say it counts as progress because throughout this article, you've said many things that your opposition, like myself, like the Critical Drinker, like Nerdrotic, you've said many things that we agree with. So now you gotta say, but this is still progress, because we're gonna say, no, it isn't. What if this isn't enough? Then how is it progress at all? If you just say the words diversity and inclusion and trans and non-binary, we said it, so that's at least progress. No, it isn't. Either go the whole 9 for progress or don't do it at all. So no, I wouldn't say this counts as progress. The twins aren't jokes or made out to be anything more or less than their Jedi counterparts. Many minorities began representation in cinema as a joke or villains. Tarek and Sarek aren't outwardly awful, they just aren't used to push a negative agenda, and their inclusion could very well help someone out there feel represented and give them strength to come out. But the twins, again, it's a comic book, which is already a dying art, about sci-fi mages. I don't know who's sent around. Star Wars has been around since the 70s. You're telling me some 12-year-old kid's gonna pick this comic book up? The odds of that are already extremely low. See these Quan Chi looking mofos and be like, I'm about to go tell my parents I like sucking dick. I'm sorry, I don't see that happening. You're really reaching. But the twins don't lend anything to the story either, besides conveniently providing plot points. Before the Star Wars universe can claim true representation, Disney needs to stop celebrating every diverse character before release. Rarely is an iconic role decided by a social media push ahead of launch, and Hollywood execs rarely know how to accurately depict specific groups they want to cater to for brownie points. It's like you're one of us! It's you've almost got it! This whole article has been things that, for the most part, I agree with, minus your weird little jabs now and again. This is what most of us you call right-wing trolls have been saying. Why do you get to say it now with absolutely no consequence, no fear of backlash, when this is what we've been saying ever since, like, Ghostbusters 2016? We knew it was coming. We saw this ahead of time. We saw where this was going because we are legitimately true nerds who have been in this sphere. Some of us for 30, 40 years, other of us since the 90s like myself. We saw the writing on the wall because we know how this goes. And we've been vilified for it for the last God knows how long. Now you get to say what we've been saying, and I'm sure you will have so much of your audience agree with you and clap like seals, Adam Sessler style. But this is what we've been saying. Maybe give some of us the acknowledgement that we deserve, because what we've wanted has been good stories. If there is representation in those good stories, if there are good characters that happen to be diverse in those good stories, we will buy the product. It's that simple. And there we have it. There we have We Got This Covered, one of the biggest left-leaning shill media sites in all of nerddom, saying the same thing that people like myself have been saying for ages. I really don't know what to say at this point. They're repeating our own talking points where it's difficult for me to even make a video on it. Do you know how many edits this is going to go through? Because so much of it's going to get cut because they're basically just saying what I have always said. I mean, I guess I can agree over and over, but that don't exactly make for an interesting video. So, yeah, I guess that's about it for this one. These are just my opinions, which actually, for the most part, seem to line up with We Got This Covered. Let me know what you think in the comments below, or let me know on Twitter, where you can find me at BoltTheWord. And please do subscribe. Just got over that 600 subscriber mark, and I would love to see it go bigger. Thank you so much. I can't appreciate it enough. And that being said, I am a nerdy news channel. I do nerdy news every day, whether it be Star Wars, Disney, Marvel, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons, you name it. It's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.